A tree as a parable, or if you like, the parable of a tree. Welcome, Vanakkam, Swagatham. I have often spent profitable hours reflecting on various aspects of nature, learning from them very valuable and stimulating spiritual insights and insights into life in general. The content of this video reflects the fruit or contains the fruit of one of those nature-focused reflections or meditations. Now think of a tree in nature. If you really look into details, you will find a tree is an aggregation of differences. It's a collection of differences. The trunk of the tree is different from its branches. The branches are different from the leaves, and maybe each leaf is different from the neighboring leaf. The fruit that the tree produces is different from the trunk, the branch, the leaf, and so on and so forth. Everything about the tree is different from everything about the tree. And the tree stands rooted in the soil, which is so very different from the trunk, the branches, the leaves, the fruit, the flower, and so on. The roots draw nourishment from the soil. The soil is not sweet, but the fruit is very sweet. So if you look at it, there is something amazing about the tree standing in nature. It stands there silently, but it doesn't mean that it is not a profound reality. It's a very profound thing. But the most important thing to realize is this, that all these differences about a tree, and without those differences, a tree cannot be imagined, cannot be constituted. You can't have a tree of which the trunk, the branches, the leaves, etc. all look exactly the same. It's a monstrosity. So the differences with which a tree is compacted or a tree is made also at the same time presents a unity. I repeat, the many differences, striking differences that comprise a tree also comprise its unity. In other words, the tree is one precisely because its constituent parts are different. The oneness of the tree stands firmly rooted in the many differences that comprise the tree. Now, without the oneness of the tree, the many differences would make no sense. Likewise, without the many differences, the oneness of the tree simply cannot be. So, according to the logic of nature, which we have forgotten today, deliberately rejected today, according to the law of nature or the logic of nature, oneness and differences necessarily imply each other. You cannot have oneness without differences, and you cannot have meaning in differences without that oneness. Now, it is possible, for example, to cut a tree down and separate its parts, and rearrange everything so that only homogeneous parts are put together. But even then, it is an impossible task, because suppose you chop up the trunks and you do it as carefully as possible to make sure that each part is identical to the other. You will never get two identical pieces. each piece will be different to the other. But assume that it's possible to have identical pieces hewn from the trunk. What about the branches? Even if you cut the branches as carefully as you can, you still cannot have pieces of the branches identical to the pieces of the trunk. When it comes to the leaf, I don't have to say anything at all. So it's simply not possible to eradicate differences from the idea of the tree and still retain the idea of the tree. Differences constitute the very foundation of the identity of the tree. At the same time, if the various constituent parts of the tree are cut or chopped up and scattered everywhere, then you don't have a tree. You have parts of the tree lying here and there, but you don't have a functioning or living tree, and you will never get a fruit or a flower from it. Now, keeping this at the back of our minds, let's consider a simile or a parable that Jesus taught. It's found in the 15th chapter of John's Gospel, the first 7 verses, where Jesus says, I am the vine, you are the branches. I am the vine, you are the branches. Now, what does he mean by this? He means that the people who come together in faith, first of all, they are one. But they have to understand that oneness aright. That oneness is not the eradication or the elimination of differences. This spiritual oneness should never be attempted to be created by homogenizing individual members, making each person behave, act, repeat, mouths exactly as the other person is doing. Homogenization is simply inadmissible into the logic of life. And therefore, it's something that Jesus Christ completely rules out. Now, the various branches, not one of them identical to the others, they all belong together in the vine, which is Jesus Christ. And because they belong together in Jesus Christ, and only to the extent that they do, the fact that each one is different to the other does not become an offense, does not become a stumbling block, does not foment conflict, alienation, tension within the community of faith. But where that relationship is disrupted or ruptured, there will be dissension, there will be party spirit, there will be split. This gives us a perspective on why disunity is so endemic in the Christian community. Non-Christians looking at the Christian community from a distance feel jealous of us, saying that Christians are a highly united group. But those who are within know how fragmented, how alienated, how mutually alienated we are. Simply because we don't have a point of coherence. We have not found our point of coherence in Jesus Christ. In this context, I am reminded of that famous poem by William Butler Yeats, the Irish poet, The Second Coming, where he senses this problem of anarchy. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the earth. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed. The center cannot hold. There is no center. When I regard the Christian presence throughout the world, what's called Christendom, the sad reality is that there is no point of coherence. Well, leave alone a mega reality like Christendom. Think of the Christians in one particular country. There's absolutely no point of coherence. Well, leave alone the country. Think of a state. Christians in Kerala who boast of great faith traditions. There's absolutely no center of coherence. Leave alone Kerala. Take a single church, any church for that matter. The first thing that strikes you is that there is no point of coherence. Branches are lying here and there, but the vine is missing. This is a very tragic reality that needs to be addressed urgently. And the reason for this, the logic of this needs to be understood without fear and favor, with an intention to rectify the mistake. The problem with Christians is that they presume that they are perfect and therefore they also renounce the freedom to correct themselves. They think that it is a wrong thing to admit that they are in error, which is the greatest mistake. As a result, the situation goes from bad to worse. The freedom to acknowledge the truth about ourselves, and also the humility to realize that all is not well with us and therefore we have a need to be healed, and as well as a willingness to be healed, which can be measured, which can be proved only in terms of our openness to the truth. That is something conspicuously absent from Christianity all over the world, but particularly in the midst of Christians in Kerala, the so-called Syrian Christians. Why Christians in Kerala are not Kerala Christians and why still have to be Syrian Christians, I don't know. It's nothing but vanity. Christianity was brought to Kerala apparently from Syria, but the St. Thomas, who is supposed to have brought Christianity to Kerala first, is of Syrian extraction. Nobody is interested. But Syria. Syrian Christians. And each church is keenest in emphasizing how it is different from the other church, so that its superiority can be injected into the perception of its followers. Now, all this is completely spiritually unacceptable. And yet, Christians who are nurtured within these sectarian or denominational traditions attach supreme value to these items of mutual alienation, not realizing that through the parable that Jesus taught, the parable of the vine and the branches, he has criticized it beyond any doubt, revealing the fact that unless and until the various elements come together and constitute one coherent whole, there will be no Christianity. In my opinion, Christianity or the way of Jesus Christ does not exist in Kerala. There may be people professing to be Christians, church-going Christians. But Christianity as the way of Jesus Christ does not exist in Kerala at all. And if all these evidences, pieces of evidence that come to the surface, come to light from day to day are not sufficient, I don't know what will be sufficient. And no attempt is being made to understand why this disease is intensifying in our midst. So, remember the parable of the vine and the branches. The branches will bear fruit only if they abide in the vine. And every branch that does not abide in Jesus Christ will not be cut down and burned. Whereas branches that abide in Jesus Christ will produce an abundant harvest. Now it is because of this profound reality that Jesus, in his high priestly prayer, which is found in the 17th chapter of John's Gospel, prays fervently for the unity of his followers. There is nothing else that Jesus prays for. There is nothing that Jesus so deeply desires as the unity of his followers. And there is nothing that is more difficult to secure and maintain than unity among Christians. When you go into any congregation, you'll be lucky to find a single congregation in Kerala among the thousands of congregations where the congregation is not split right in the middle. And one block warring against the other. It may be a low-grade fever, it may be cold war, but war there is, hot or cold. Sometimes it sometimes it blows hot, sometimes it blows cold, but war there is. All in the name of Jesus Christ. So when you look at nature, looking at the tree, you'll realize that's the image Jesus has in mind. The challenge, the spiritual challenge of harmonizing diversity and oneness, realizing that oneness is what lends meaning to diversity, and diversity is what invests oneness with richness and beauty. And it is this richness and beauty that Jesus expects of those who profess to believe in him. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.